so it's good that we're able to come here tonight. I just wanted to let you know for the other segment tonight, we're actually going to be doing a talk with Robin Clark. He's one of our newer members, and he was the first recipient this year of the Explore the Universe. So he's going to talk about his journey to getting there. So I'll pass it over to you, Robin.
Everybody hears me okay?
You need the pointer.
I got it here. The pointer is coming. Test drive. Turn it off.
On the side.
Oh, okay. Well, pointer, there we go. Lights, camera on. All right, as Darren said, I'm relatively new to the club. I started with RASC about a year ago. Started doing observing about 6 months ago. Once it started warming up, and I didn't freeze my fingers putting the telescope in. Accidental astronomer. Didn't start out to become an astronomer. I was over in Australia and New Zealand 2 years ago on a holiday and stopped in to see family in Perth. My brother had recently bought himself a 6-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope, and he was quite proudly showing it off one day. And we went down to the beach, and I was looking at a ship. It's the first time I'd looked through a telescope in my life. Looking at a ship that was about 8 kilometers offshore, and lo and behold, with the telescope that he had, I could see I could read the call signs on the lifeboats that were on the boat that was 6 or 8 kilometers away. And so that's a 45-foot lifeboat 8 kilometers away, and you can read it. My wife and I had been talking about getting something that we could look at what the fishermen were doing out in front of our place out at Grand Beach. And so we kind of thought, well, maybe that's something we could make use of at our place. So, came back to Canada and started shopping. Not a good plan. So, I ended up, I went on Kijiji, and about a year ago I snagged a good deal on an 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain. The big brother of my big brother's telescope. Got to outdo the siblings, you know. So, first lesson learned was there's something called atmospheric distortion. And my new purchase is really almost useless for observing terrestrial because of the amount of distortion that you get off the lake and off the ice in the wintertime. So I couldn't tell whether they were catching jackfish or whether they were catching pickerel. Big problem. I'd spent a pile of money buying a nice piece of equipment that was the wrong instrument for the job. So I had to find a way to make use of that instrument, or I'd be buying an awful lot of nice dinners for my wife for a long time. So last year, actually, Darren did a presentation here about equipment, and he spoke a lot about binoculars and talked about making sure you get the right equipment that you're going to make use of. Well, my 8-inch telescope needed to find a use. So I had to join RASC to learn how to use it. And the package that I ended up with was a whole bunch of gear that I still haven't quite figured out how to use. And I've added gear since I bought the package because people around here are really good salesmen. And they recommend things that, oh, by the way, you should maybe look at getting this, or by the way, maybe you should get that. So my package now includes a number of things that weren't there to start with, but it still includes a number of things like the wedge, and the, what is this? I can't remember. Off-axis guy, and then the camera. I still haven't figured out how to work any one of those three pieces of equipment. Don't know what to use them for, so they're still sitting in a trunk that I don't cart around with. I've added solar filter over here, and I've added the binoculars, and I've added the case, so that, and it's now a portable system, whereas when I first got it, you had to plug it into 18. So battery pack is a Canadian Tire special. All in all, the lesson here is you can spend a lot of money on equipment very quickly. Even though I did buy this, a lot of this second-hand, you have to be very careful about what you're buying second-hand, and I would highly recommend taking advantage of the borrowing program that the RASC has before you start spending a bunch of money, because you can soak in a lot of cash very quickly. So by the way, if anybody understands how to use any of this with my telescope, I'd love to get a lesson sometime. The learning curve, learning astronomy. And I am not an astronomer, and I'll tell you right now that what I know about astronomy would take about 3 sentences to sum up. So I'm still somewhere way down at this end of the curve, trying to figure out how to use my equipment. And generally I can now set up my telescope without too much problem. Sometimes my fingers get a little cold and I have a little more difficulty taking it down late in the evening, but generally not too bad. But I have followed this curve, or not. And yeah, I've got to this point a couple times. It's about how much do you want to learn, how fast do you want to learn it, and what have you got yourself set for goals and objectives in learning about astronomy. I started out just wanting to learn how to use my equipment and learning my way around the night sky a little bit, and I think I've kind of accomplished that a little bit, but I still got a long way to go before I would say I'm proficient, even in using the equipment that I have. Oops, wrong button. Next one. My kids actually joked about me getting started with astronomy because we go and watch a movie in the evening after supper, and 10 minutes into the movie, most nights, I'd be sound asleep on the couch, and they'd watch the movie. So I had a hard time staying awake in the evenings. What keeps me going now is the learning. There's so much you can learn, and it connects to so many different interests. If you're interested in history, as I am, for example, there's a lot of the original explorers were navigating by stars. So there's a connection to history. There's a connection to art, because there's a lot of mythology is based on astronomy and the constellations. Well, maybe the constellations are based on, who knows, I don't know which came first, because some of that's about 3,000 to 4,000 years old. There's a lot of sciences that have connection to astronomy as well, so there's a number of things that it's about what your interests are and how they connect to the science of astronomy. It makes it interesting and makes things move along and gives you the urge to stay up late at night and go out at 2 o'clock in the morning and look at stars with Darren in Birds Hill Park. It is fun, though. What works? First and foremost, setting objectives. So when I started out in the spring this year, going out and doing a little bit of observing, I started out that I wanted to try and accomplish the Explore the Universe list. It's 110 objects divided into, I think, 8 categories, and they're specific objects, and they're broken down into 4 seasons. So you can go out at any given time of the year and take your list of items and identify objects in the night sky out of that list, and they count towards the Explore the Universe certificate. So that was my initial big objective, was to get the Explore the Universe. But within that, each time I went out, I would sit down beforehand and I would take the Star Atlas and I would take Stellarium, a software program, and I would figure out what my targets were off of the Explore the Universe list for a given evening out. I usually set myself 6 or 8 targets for a night, and sometimes I did all 6 or 8, sometimes I wouldn't. It just depended on where the clouds were in the sky, where the light pollution was, what time we went out, and how long it took me to find an object, because there were times when I'd go out and I'd spend an hour trying to find one object and still not be able to see it. Knew where it was, knew where it should be, but I couldn't identify it. So I'd have to move on to another one, or I'd just give up and pack up and go home. It's really sometimes frustrating when you go out and you're with a bunch of people that are more experienced observers, and you spend an hour trying to find one object that should be very easy to locate, and they'll come along and they'll take their binoculars and they'll go, yep, there it is. And you have to kind of overcome the fact that it's going to take some practice before you can actually identify things. So the preparation, setting up your targets for the night. But along with that, check your gear. Have you got batteries? Have you got your battery pack charged? Have you got bug spray? Because the bugs can sometimes get bad. Have you got a jacket? Have you got a hat? Because the bugs do like to get into your hair. In my case, where I go when I'm going out on my own, I sometimes have to be a little bit concerned about critters. The coyotes run around the marsh out near Grand Marais, and bears do. And so you need to make sure that you've prepared by letting somebody know where you're going and where you're going to be and when you're going to be home. And also make sure you have something that's going to maybe scare off the bear if the bear does prowl around, if you're out by yourself. I haven't had any bear problems, but they do exist. So make sure that you've done a gear check. A couple times I've actually assisted where I've had spares in my bag that others needed batteries for a red dot finder or a battery for a laser pointer or something. So just make sure that you've got what you need to get to where you're going. And along with that, if you need to take your Star Atlas with you, maybe use paper clips on the pages that you need to reference for the objects you're doing for that night. Practice. The first time I went out at night to set up my telescope back in, I think it was about March. I went out to Grand Beach to set up my telescope, and it was probably about 10 or 15 below. Silly thing to do. Because if it's the first time you're doing this out in the field, and you're fumbling around in the dark, silly thing to do, and everything is cold, and by the time you've put things together, you realize that the liquid crystal display on your go-to scope doesn't work at minus temperatures, or doesn't work very well. And then you get frustrated with things and start taking them apart with frozen fingers. It comes to a point where you wonder whether it's really worth it. So I learned a lesson very early on, courtesy of RASC and planning for the Birds Hill events. Go out before dark. Allow yourself half an hour where you can actually see what you're doing and get your scope set up and aligned, and then you're ready to do the star alignment once the stars come out, so that you're ready to go. So a little bit of practice putting things together and setting things up and tearing things down is very advantageous. Practice using your equipment. Practice using the star charts. Practice using the eyes different ways in order to see the objects that you're looking for. The more you use your equipment, the more comfortable you become with using it, whether it's a borrowed telescope or binoculars, or whether it's some that you own. The more you use them, the better you become at using them. And the more you go out and look at the stars, the easier it is to find Andromeda or Triangulum or any number of other objects out there. Andromeda, by the way, was the one that I was looking at for almost an hour before I realized I was looking at it, when somebody came along with their binoculars and said, "That's it." Be patient. Don't give up too easily. Sometimes those faint fuzzy objects that you thought were clouds in your telescope aren't really clouds. They're actually the nebula or the galaxy that you were supposed to be seeing. And you thought it was a cloud and you walked right by it about 4 times. And it takes practice doing the star hopping to figure out where things are. There are people in this room that make it seem really easy. I've been out with a number of them and they've said, yeah, you go there, 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 and that's the one you're looking for. Well, because they've been doing it for 40 years, they can make it look easy. When you get started, it's not quite so easy. And it does take a little bit of time and a little bit of practice to learn your way around. It's like a city, you know. It takes time to learn your way around a new city or town. And it's the same thing in the night sky. It takes practice and it takes time to find your way around. So some of the resources that I've used in order to get to where I am at this point, all of them are readily available. The first one I went to was the planetarium. Planetarium offers a number of programs. I don't know exactly which ones they're running this year, but last year they ran a beginner program that they took you into the theater and they did a lot of the star hopping where it's nice and warm and comfortable and you can lean back and actually not strain your neck looking up at the sky because you're in chairs that are designed for it. That program, I understand they do run that every year, but you'd have to get a hold of the planetarium to find out when they're next running it. And it was a very good beginner star hopping lesson in how to get around the night sky, and it was very comfortable to do videos. The RASC has a number of publications that they put out, the journal being one. The journal often has a segment in it about digital applications or software that's available. There's probably people here that are much more conversant in the digital technology age than I am, but there's some apps that come up in the journal once in a while that are pretty good. The handbook, I find the handbook is very useful in some respects, but it's a challenge in others because It's far more advanced than I am. There's a lot of technical and scientific information in there that at this point in my journey, I don't quite understand it, but I try. But there's stuff in there that is very useful. There's a number of charts in there that tell you what's coming up in the night sky in each month or each quarter. There's information about where to find the planets at any given time. And I believe I read one article in there just recently that explained how to calculate when the Great Red Spot was going to go by on Jupiter. So you could take a look at that. There's a lot of information in there. Sky News is a little more easy to leaf through in the evening than the handbook is. And it has a number of current events, and the centerfold has what's up and coming over a 2-month period. Quite handy to have and take a look at when it comes out. There's some new copies out tonight, I see. Night Watch is a very good beginner book. The planetarium program, I believe, is based on a lot of what Terence Dickinson has in the Night Watch. The book has a number of really good star hopping tips in it, and how to align yourself so that you can see different objects. It's got, I think it's 20 maps in it that are quick references for constellations by season. And a pocket atlas. There's a couple different versions of the Sky and Telescope Pocket Atlas. The one I'm using is the smaller one. The jumbo version is a more in-depth. It has a greater number of stars in it. So if you're looking for a bit more detail, get the jumbo. This one is really good for getting started. It has, I think it's to magnitude 7. There are a lot of digital applications and software out there. I use Stellarium. There's others that are, Stellarium is a planetarium software that it's free download, and it gives you, based on your location, you plug in your longitude and latitude, and it'll show you the night sky for where you are in the world. The internet has a number of interesting places you can go to look for information on astronomy. One of the things that I have been doing on the internet is there's an open text website where you can actually get an astronomy, the university astronomy textbook, and so I've been referencing that textbook. Found out about that because I have a daughter that's taking a history course in Brandon. There's apps for your phone. A couple that I use are Astro Clock, which is convenient to tell you when planets are rising and setting, and when the sunset will be, and when the twilight zone is, and things like that. So Astro Clock is fairly good, and that's one I found out about through the journal. Heavens Above is another one, and the interesting thing about Heavens Above is that it'll tell you all the space junk that you see flying by at any given time at night. So all those satellites, a lot of it is identified and tracked, and you can find out exactly what you're looking at using Heavens Above. There's a number of other websites and things that are out there as well. There's probably a whole presentation that could be done on what's available digitally for astronomy. So about 6 weeks ago, I finished the 55 objects for Explore the Universe. And now I have to set myself a new goal. I've kind of got in mind that Mr. Messier here, who didn't want to look at all those faint fuzzy objects of 110 that he found, might be my next goal over the next 12 or 18 months. I'll see how many of those I can find and identify. There's a number of other RASC certificate programs that I haven't taken a look at yet. There's still 55, actually there's about 50 Explore the Universe targets that I have yet to find, and I might continue working on those. But I've kind of got the bug now, so I have to set myself a new goal. So sometime over the next few months I'll set myself a new goal, because it's too darn cold to go out and play out into the stars. And I've also now got a solar filter, so I might go and do some solar observing, because I want to avoid having to stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning with the RASC members at Birds Hill Park, and that's really hard on the system. So in conclusion, if you're just starting on your journey in astronomy and you're not sure how far you're going to go, prepare, set objectives, practice. That's the key things that I would say. The slide that I've put up here is the title and the conclusion slide. A couple things I wanted to point out. With my 8-inch scope, my first observation of Saturn with an 8-inch scope is very, very similar to what you see there. And the same with Jupiter. Don't be disappointed. You're not going to get Hubble quality photographs through amateur astronomy telescopes unless you've really got high-end stuff. And even then, it's not going to get a lot sharper than that, given something I learned about very early on, atmospheric distortion. And the moon is still a lot of fun to look at, and I usually end up staring at that for a few minutes at the end of every time I go out, just because you can never get tired of looking at all those craters and the Swiss cheese ball out there. Any questions? Michelle? I did not, no. I went looking to find photos on the internet that were done with an 8-inch scope.
The one on the left looks similar to the cell phone photo I took, so that's
Yeah. No, I purposely selected pictures that were very similar to what I would see through my scope and what I have seen through my scope when I've been out at Birds Hill. And so, yeah, that's why I selected those, because I don't want to disappoint anybody. You're not going to see Hubble quality when you look through even my 8-inch scope, which Darren says is a pretty good scope. I have to take his word for it because I don't know. Yes?
Have you gotten into astrophotography at all yet, or?
No.
When I was starting, I would just put my cell phone up to my viewfinder and kind of try that. Did you try that at all? Or?
No, I haven't tried it all. I've been a photographer for decades. Been very heavily involved in photography over the years at different times. But at this point in time, I'm just more interested in learning my way around the night sky and just enjoying looking. I haven't got the bug yet to go into astrophotography. Yes?
How do you log your stuff, and do you sketch or do anything like that?
I do not sketch a lot because I'm a really crappy artist, even with a pencil. I do a little bit on moon craters, but not so much with the stars. And one of the things that I would like to learn is that next image camera that I have how to use that instead of the sketching, because the imager is supposed to be able to just be a pop-in, pop-out type of thing for doing the replications. Yes?
Couple of questions. Number one, have you tried a planisphere?
A planisphere?
Yes.
I have looked at them. I don't use one. I prefer to use my star charts. A planisphere, I suspect, although like I said, I haven't used it a lot, a planisphere will give you the general layout, but it doesn't go into quite as much detail, I don't think, as the atlas does.
I find it helps to learn the constellations a lot easier.
Without a doubt it would, because it gives you the whole view,
Yep.
as opposed to having to flip pages. But, I haven't used them.
What about your telescope? As far as tracking and stuff like that, how do you find it works in the cold over the winter?
Generally, it's worked okay once I learned how to figure out the alignment properly. It took me a couple attempts, several attempts actually, to figure out how to properly align it. And depending on which type of alignment I use, it sometimes tracks better. So if I use planetary alignment as opposed to a 3-star alignment, the planetary alignment tends to drift more than the 3-star. That's my experience so far. Anybody else? Yes?
You can observe in the winter, and the coldest I've done is -30, and the Orion Nebula looks fabulous at -30, except you get frostbite on your nose when it touches the eyepiece.
Yes, I would probably agree with you.
A dog is probably the easiest one to do because it has the least moving parts.
With the equipment that I have, the motors tend to be an issue, and the liquid crystal display is, I think, the biggest issue with operating in cold weather. It can be done, and there's even ways to make my equipment work in colder weather, use hand warmers, things like that. My personal experience, I'd probably be more likely to take my new binoculars out for 45 minutes or an hour, as opposed to spending the time setting up my big telescope in the wintertime. And just because they're a lot easier to set up, a lot faster to get up and running, and with the larger field of view that you get with a pair of binoculars as opposed to a telescope, you can get a little bit more accomplished in the course of an hour than you can with a telescope. So that's my experience so far. Ask me 5 years from now if my opinion's the same. It might be changed. Anyone else? Yes?
How did you ensure that your 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain was in decent working order when you bought it off Kijiji? How did you test it? Or did you just live the life of faith?
No, not entirely. When I founded it, it was actually in Saskatoon at the time. As I mentioned, I have done some photography and worked with lenses and things in the past with camera equipment, so I understood a little bit about what to check and what needed to be kind of verified as far as the focus and making sure that there was no slippage and making sure nothing was rattling around and no dents and bangs were evident in the equipment. I actually I wasn't going anywhere near Saskatchewan at the time, but my son was going in that direction, so I had him meet the fellow that was selling the equipment. The fellow set it all up. My son phoned me, and I walked him through what to check, and I relied on what he saw and the opinion of what he was seeing to verify it. But I would not recommend that unless you are familiar with the questions to ask and the things to check. Buying used equipment is sometimes a really good deal. Sometimes you can be duped, and so you have to be careful with buying used equipment. If you're not familiar with what to check, find somebody that can verify it for you or check for you. Any other questions?
Hi. I have two questions. I know into all this world of astronomy, so I found very interesting your topic and your discussion. We have been looking at the website of the association, and there are some log files, no, to write down what you have found. Do you have any example or advice, description of how to fill those log files?
Come see me at the break. I actually have my logbook with me tonight. You can take a look and I can show you some examples.
And
Okay.
the second question, is this an activity for a family? I mean, do you argue with your wife about who has to look at the telescope first? So?
No. If you're both interested in it, then it's great. It's an excuse to get away from the house and away from the TV and the hubbub and go out and have a cup of tea out under the stars or a glass of wine if you like, whatever, and just go and enjoy an evening out. And it doesn't cost you anything except for a little bit of wear and tear on your eyeballs.
So do you do all your observing up by Grand Beach and Grand Marais, or do you do any intra-city observing?
I have done a bit down here at Birds Hill Park as well, but generally it's been Birds Hill and Grand Marais is where I've been so far. I was looking at the moon on the Las Vegas Strip a couple nights ago, but it's really hard to see things on the Las Vegas Strip given the amount of fluorescence.
Like pollution.
I have a question.
Yes.
How did you decide on the amount that you ended up with and on the Schmidt-Cassegrain? There's one that requires the same image. So have you looked it up on the Celestron or Celestron website?
My brother was the researcher on the Schmidt-Cassegrain, and his argument was that his 6-inch was light and portable. So that's what he opted for being able to get away from downtown Perth where he lived, to get out to a place where he could set up and look at the stars in the southern hemisphere. So I basically went on his research in selecting the telescope that I got. As far as the mount, it's the standard Celestron tripod and the standard Celestron go-to mount. And so it's what came with the package, that's what I got. I didn't go shopping. What I would say about the mount is that given the weight of the equipment that's going on it, it's stretched to the limit. The tripod is really stretched to the limit. If there's one thing about this setup that I would be looking at upgrading at some point, it would probably be the tripod, because it is a little bit light for the weight of the equipment that you're putting on. Jared?
What was the biggest stumbling block that the RASC dropped the ball with as far as going forward for you?
Biggest stumbling blocks? Well, it had more to do with where I live than with the RASC. But for me, living an hour north of the city and having all the observer sessions down at Glenlee, it just didn't, it posed too much of a challenge for me to get to the observer sessions early on. So when the RASC started doing some observer nights at Birds Hill, I jumped on that, and I'd be the first one to say that part of the reason I jumped on it was to try and make sure that we kept going, because it's a lot easier for a number of people, not just myself, but it's a lot easier for a number of people to get to Birds Hill than it is to go all the way down to Glenlee on the south side of the city. Granted, Glenlee has an advantage on the south viewing because you're not looking across the city lights, but for a number of people that are just starting out, it's about how far do you want to go to get to a place that you can learn a little bit. So kudos to the RASC and to Darren for starting that and carrying on with it over the summer. It's been great. Anything else? Going once, going twice? What? One? Okay.
All right, we'll move on. Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, we'll do yours first.
I'm only going to be 3 minutes or so. Testing. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Robin, for that great talk, by the way. I think with the number of questions, you definitely hit a mark there. And by the way, the check's in the mail for all those kudos. No, there's a lot of things that happen, and this is one of the reasons why we started to initiate this mentorship program, and I'm really glad that you brought the good points up. The important thing is to be able to get out under the stars, and whether it ends up being at a convenient location south of the city or north of the city, we try to do our very best to, get the participation, and that people are learning from each other too. Somebody else like yourself might find something, and hearing I've seen you a couple of times help people out as well, and thank you for that. And some of the other folks that are doing that too, it's really nice to see. So that's what it's all about, is getting out and practicing and learning. And it's easy to talk about it, but when you're out, you can definitely see more. So I'm just going to, for those of you, I see a bunch of new faces, so I'm glad I'm doing this again, because there are some new members, and some people who maybe didn't come out over the summer. So I'm just reminding everybody who is a little newer. For those of you that are brand new members or feel that you're still a new member and you haven't talked to us before, my name is Darren Hennig, and I'm spearheading the mentorship program here under the, the endorsement of our club president, Brian Snatch. And we'll be around during the break here, so if you want to talk to either of us on how to get involved or even signing on equipment and so on, we'll talk. I think Brian's going to talk a little bit about that later. So the idea here is to help new members get kind of the right start, so they're not sitting in limbo. And we're only doing a monthly meeting, and sometimes people don't get the chance to communicate back and forth as much. So we try to host events and have people come out, and this gives them an opportunity to look through some equipment if you don't have a telescope or a pair of binoculars yet, and get an idea what's going on. Also, if you have some new equipment and you're kind of lost and going, I don't know how to set this up, of course, had we done that a little while earlier, you would have been able to take advantage of that earlier, but I'm glad we got going on that for you. And then, of course, we're going to be doing some learning modules as well over the winter when it is a little less amenable for doing observing. Brian and I are going to be putting together a list for some things. I might talk to Sylvia at the break, if you don't mind me borrowing you for a few minutes, Sylvia. I think it would be very nice to have maybe set up something sometime. Maybe we can talk to some people that are more avid sketchers. Maybe we can have a sketch module for those that might want to do that sometime. To be determined. I don't want to throw any pressure on you, but maybe if you just meet with me and talk, it would be nice to to see what we can come up with for that, because I think there are some people that would like to learn how to sketch, and maybe that would be a good program to do over the winter for people going there, getting going. So again, my name is Darren Hennig. I'm on the council, and these are the three folks right now that have volunteered. And actually, we have Abdul. I'm sorry I didn't put your name up, but Abdul Al-Mani, who also handles our loader scope program. He's also been helping and been instrumental during our sessions for the newbies as well. But if anybody else wants to volunteer their time once in a while, I don't expect anybody to come out all the time, but if you, let's say, are able to come out once in a while and assist us, it's a huge help. We get a lot of enthusiasm from the gang when we do these events, so it's really good. One quick thing I just wanted to mention, and there was a little bit of banter on the RASC website, or sorry, the email reflector here not too long ago. We are going to be hosting, actually co-hosting events this year. Brian's going to be, and he'll talk a little bit more about what he's going to do at Glen Lee. During November 11th, there's a Mercury Transit happening. I'm going to be hosting the one at Burns Hill. This is all weather permitting, of course. And the idea in our case is we're going to get up at dawn, and not get up at dawn, but be out there set up, ready to go for dawn. And it'll go till about midday or so in the event. The unfortunate thing on this event is that Mercury will already be in partial transit. It'll be about 25% across the disk at sunrise. So for those of you that have solar gear, definitely bring it out to either location. And then for those of you that don't, come out anyway, because there'll be lots of stuff to look at. I'm hoping it'll be a fun event for people, but we'll see how it goes. And hopefully the temperature won't be too cold yet. I'm hoping it'll be at least reasonable anyway. But definitely dress warm and bring coat. So that's all I have for today, other than I'll just mention for those of you that do want to go to Glen Lee, this is Highway 75 South. You look for Research Station Road, you just go across the highway, go down to the next entrance, there's a gate, and then you go to the end of the road and you'll see the observatories there. So that's, for those of you that don't know how to get to Glen Lee, definitely contact either Brian or you can even look at the maps on our website as well. Okay. And that's everything for me. Thanks, guys.
Brian, who's talking?
Thanks for coming out. My name is Brian Statch. For those who are new, I'm the president, the club president, and I'm also the director of Glen Lee. Hopefully you guys are recovering from last week, storm. I was really debating about whether to cancel last week, but probably the first president to cancel or postpone a meeting. So, but I think in likeness, I think it was probably a pretty good choice to do. So so this is what we have lined up for today. I'm looking forward to Jay and Judy's presentation. Judy will be mostly talking about their experience for the solar eclipse. So this meeting, because we are recording it, this is for October the 18th, 2019, so we play it back why we were so late, because of the storm. All right. Okay, so we have refreshments, coffee and tea. I see Kevin and Gail here. So if you want to donate, they have a little thing there for you. And of course, it's our lineup. And yes, Boston Pizza I did book, so we're good. All right, so let's move on. What do we have? U of M open house. I believe that changed, right, Michelle? That's
Yeah, I'm, just like the previous speaker gave his experience, I'm gonna talk about my shopping experience with Telescope.
shopping experience. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
what I went through.
Okay, well, that's nice. Okay, so we'll look forward to that. And of course, weather permitting, we get to do some observing. How's the telescope coming out? Is it still working okay? Is the dome okay? Michelle?
Oh, sorry?
The dome, like the LX200 you guys have there, is it functioning okay or?
I don't know, I haven't been there for a while.
Okay, I missed out the last one because of my eye surgery, but now I'm fully functional and I'm really happy how it turned out. Okay, Oak Marsh, that was yesterday. And And it was really nice. I learned a lot about birds. And apparently some of them travel like 42,000 kilometers, some don't travel all the way to land, some just travel over the oceans. Really interested, but the lifespan of birds are only for a couple of years. But anyway, that was last night, and I did have this. So the next one is November 21st. I don't know who the speaker is. I think you're still looking for it. Dusty is the new person that's taking over for Jacques for the presentation. So we'll see who the presentation or the presenter is. What else do we have? Okay, transit of Mercury. Darren talked about this. Yes, I would be hosting the Glen Lee for a number of reasons. Why? One, we have a war room. Okay, so I don't know how cold it's going to be, but also too, we have a pretty good clearing in the southeast of it. So I think I'll have the PST going for those, and I might have some coffee and donuts. We'll see. But it takes place around sunrise, around 8:30 or so. But we're going to miss part of it. As Sky News has pointed out, we're missing contact 1 and 2. So by the time we actually get to it, rotation of the Earth and all that, it'll be well underway. Quarter right into the sun. So then Darren's doing Birds Hill. Still a nice place to go to. We'll see how the weather turns out. And it's for November 11th, so actually everyone should be off, including me. Okay, RASC list. Who do we have as new members here? Anyone new? Oh, great. Okay, so when I copy down this link, we'll get you onto the RSC list. Take a picture of that, and then it might take a while for you to get registered, but just say you're a new member, and you'd like to be on the list, and this way everyone can participate. If you have any questions, any ideas, any notice, announcement we'll make would be over the RSC list. And of course, you have to wait for approval.
Interject for a second. For those new members tonight, sorry, I should have mentioned this before. For those new members that that just, let's say, signed on in the last month or so, or 2 months, besides being on the list, come and see me so I can get your email address so I can let you know like the location of events and stuff in the short term until you get on the listing. I think it's important so that way we don't miss anybody, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, dear. All right. What else? Explore the Universe. Dennis is not here, but if you want to get on to the program here, Explore the Universe, kind of get you familiar with what objects are out there. You have to do some sketching. Doesn't have to be perfect, but the point of the matter is you guys get familiar with the skies. It's a great program for new members and get to test out some equipment. And of course, I don't know how long it takes, about 3 to 6 months, but if you want to contact Dennis, there's this email right there. We'd be happy to point you in the right direction. Next, calendars. We have calendars now. Abdul, got them. Right. So see Abdul, he's a council member, our accountant. So about $14, and we only have about 50, I believe, in stock or something. Anyways,
Yeah, 50 in stock, yeah.
50?
Yeah, 50,
Okay.
50.
All right. So that's 2020. I like this calendar because I have it in my room and posted. I can see what the phases of the moon is, what events are going on, and what other astronomical events going on. So I highly recommend it, especially for the new members. Next, okay, telescope loading program. We have this going. Abdul, again, is responsible for that. I do have a new item. I did mention it. Johnny has donated a metal detector. And thanks to Ralph, he gave me a little meteorite so I can practice what it sounds like. So if you want to do some meteorite hunting. But before we do that, I have to get familiar with the meter detector. I'll train you how to use it. And of course, you can beat loan it out. Okay, what else do we have? Okay, that's some of the telescopes that we have here. PST, I really love it. You know, it's on a tracking mount. But we do have other telescopes. Abdul, there's anything out right now, or?
Right now, I have the PST available for loaning, but I believe we will use it in the Mercury
Mercury,
so I'm not sure.
So we'll keep it there. Okay, all right, so everything's pretty much loaned out. All right, Landing Observatory. That's me, I'm the director. Great, I've been doing it for a number of years. I get some help along the way. It's been improving a lot. There's a lot of things that we're trying to do to improve. facilities. It's almost fully remote control. We're still testing it out. But of course, last year hasn't been great for the weather-wise. But anyways, if you want the key, come see me. It's a $10 deposit, and if you do return, you get your money back. Of course, we have the war room. It's fully functional, right? So that's what we have here. We have this LX200, 12-inch, really nice. It's fully automatic. I'll show you how to hook up to your laptop. I got the connectors for it. This is thanks to Brian Greenberg. He did this for me. It's a really nice job. This is also, these controls right here, it's also in the warm room. So technically you can control the dome from the warm room. And also the LX200. And of course we have a coffee maker, and then we have a microwave oven, and we've got a lot of stock of coffee, tea, hot chocolate, cream sugar, all that. So it's all part of being a member only. All right, so Saturday I did check the weather, and it looks like it's pretty good. It keeps changing, but according to Clear Sky Clock, let's go with that for now. It looks like it's going to be pretty good. So we are going to have a member site, and I didn't establish a time, so I'll say around 9 o'clock. Okay? So if you want to come out here, it's a great way for the members. I know there's a lot of members out there. I'll show you how to use the LX200. And you can start learning on your own how to use it. Yeah, a lot of members, I don't know. But anyways, we'll see you tomorrow. If we do, if you have any questions of where it is, come see me at the break. I'll be happy to show you where it is. All right, the mentor program, Darren has mentioned about this. Of course, we have the other program too, the workshops that we're trying to work into as well. Not just the mentor program, but the workshops. So if you've got any questions about how to clean your telescopes, how to maintain it, other things there, we're trying to work out this program for the new members or even the senior members if you want to. But come see us during the break, and we'll be happy to point you in the right direction. All right. This is just some of the programs that we have lined up for you, weather permitting, but this weather hasn't been great for this year, but hopefully, tomorrow we can start doing it. I'll be more than happy to show you how to use the LX200, which is one of the part of the program there. All right, this is the council members. So, the council members, who's here? Sign that, please. Don't wave your hand, just stand up. All right, these are the council members. If you have any questions, any concerns, anything like that, please come see them or me, the president. And we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. All right, so let's get this moving on because it's 8 o'clock. Great, we might be on time. All right, we'll start up with, what's up with Jay?
Okay, what's up? What's up? Something like that once. Here we are coming into the first of the 6 cloudiest months of the year. So I have to show you what the Milky Way and the sky at night looks like from our handy dandy planetarium program. So this is October 11th sky at 9:30 in the evening, and you will never see the Milky Way like this, but you can get pretty close if you're 1,000 miles away from anywhere else with lights. But basically what we're seeing here is that the sky now is in the south. The Milky Way is now slipped over towards the southwest. It's starting to sink into the western sky, and we've still got some pretty good views of the Milky Way because it's dark before 9:30, and as we get into December. So for a while, the Milky Way is going to be sort of straddling off to the south and southwest, and pretty nicely visible. But eventually, all of these nice little lines in here will disappear below the horizon and leave us with this part of the sky, which is circumpolar. And And if we go to the next slide and see what it looks like a month later, and 1 month in the sky is equivalent to the way the sky would change overnight. So this could either be the next morning just before the sun comes up or November 11th. And you can see that a lot of the bright parts of the Milky Way are now way over in the west, sinking into the sky in the west. But the winter part of the Milky Way is now starting to rise up in the morning. And some of the fairly bright parts of that are down low. This part of the winter Milky Way sky is not as full of goodies as this part in here. So mostly you would look for things like open clusters in here, and you would be starting to see galaxies and things like that in the parts both above and below the Milky Way. With any luck, you'll be able to see some of these skies. Planets, Mercury's in the evening sky, but it's very poorly positioned for us, being very low in the sky. And so it's probably best not to try too hard about it. However, on the 20th, it's at its greatest distance away from the sun, so presumably it'll be in the darkest part of the sky then, and you should be able to spot it low down near the horizon. Venus is above Mercury, but it's sinking toward the horizon, also poorly placed because the ecliptic, the path that the planets follow in the sky, is low down in the sky at this time of year. So by month's end, both of them will be headed off into the sun, or at least lower in the sky. Here's a picture of them on the 20th, and this separation of Mercury from the horizon here is something like 2.5 degrees, and this is 3.5 degrees. So we're talking 6 diameters of the sun or moon above the horizon. And in this depiction, you see it's still got a blue sky, so this is 6:30 p.m. So there's a really very, very fine window between 6:30 and 7 where it might just be dark enough to see the two of them if you want. But better off to wait for the next time around when the ecliptic, which is this line here, will be higher up in the sky and the planets will be better positioned. Of course, you know from my talk, 2 months back, that the ecliptic's at this angle now, but later on in the year it'll be at this angle, so the planets come up much higher above the horizon, for the same distance away from the sun. And here we are, the 29th, only 9 days later, and you can see Mercury's pretty much at it at 6:30 p.m. The planetarium program has now made the sky a little darker, so Venus is probably not too difficult at this point. I think Mercury would have to be impossible, and there's a very, very thin crescent moon, so on the 29th would be a little bit of a pretty scene if you've got a good look at the sky out towards the west horizon. That was not the right button to push. Jupiter is in the southwest, and it's gradually moving in towards the sun. Saturn is up nice and high in the south, trending around to the southwest as we get into November. Uranus is at opposition, which means that it's due south at midnight. It's in its best position to be seen, although once again we have this low ecliptic, so it'll be there, but it won't be very high in the sky. And Neptune is also visible in the southeast and rising, and it gets up to a 24-degree altitude, which is reasonably decent. I'd like it to be 45 or higher, not this time. We have a comet, not much of a comet, called Africano. It's about magnitude 8.5, and it's sinking fairly quickly toward the horizon. I'll show some pictures of that. We have October 22, a peak of the Orionid meteor shower, but it's not a particularly strong shower with this bright moon going at a zenith hourly rate, the sort of theoretical perfect skies and observing of 20 to 40. Yes.
Is that, when you put 22, is that after midnight? Like after midnight on the 22nd? I see the 21st mentioned, so I'm wondering.
Oh, that could be,
Is
yes.
that the evening of the
I think,
21, 22?
yeah, likely, but you know, with a peak like this and a relatively small rate, you're probably best to straddle 2 nights if you wanted to go see it. I don't even know what, looked up the forecast for the 22nd. The moon is up though, which is a 45% moon, so it comes up a little bit around midnight or slightly afterwards. So we've got some darkness in the early evening to watch this. But the Orion itself will be below the horizon at that time, so that what you'll see is the meteors skimming the top of the atmosphere, which will be longer tracks, but not as many of them as you might see when the radiant is up. On October the 30th, we get the Moon and Jupiter together, not particularly close, and then 2 days later it goes under Saturn, again not particularly close. November the 11th, we'll say more about that, the transit of Mercury. And I've gone out as far as the 18th since we're a little later this meeting than usual, and we get the peak of the Leonid meteor shower. Again, you can see the moon is rising at 12:30, but that shower could be quite nice in the time period before the moon rises. So here we have a picture of Comet, or at least where it is, and you see it sinking down almost due south, up 8.5 degrees, and it's just headed down this way. There's maybe a week in which it might be visible. So if you're desperate for a comet, then 8.5 magnitude right now, so one of the small telescopes out at Glenley would show it to you quite nicely. November 11, this is the transit of Mercury, and sunrise is at 7:34. It's central on the sun at 9:24, so you got almost 2 hours until it reaches the center of the sun, and then it goes on for 2.5 more hours until it ends just after noon. It takes 1 minute and 41 seconds for the little disk of Mercury to cross the limb of the sun. It's a tiny little thing. You probably won't see it in the PST. You might just be able to catch a glimpse of it, but it takes it, to see it best, it takes a decent-sized telescope. So any one of the telescopes at Glenley, except the PST, will show it. You might have a problem making sure there are solar filters. This is where and how it will pass across the sun. So in contrast to the last transit, which was on the edge of the sun, this one is fairly central across the sun. And of course, even though it's almost a month away, I've already got a prediction of where the sunspots will be here. This is off my website, but it shows you where the whole thing is visible. So we didn't quite get in. It's already underway when it comes rises here. And these maps show average cloud cover. With the redder it is, the higher the average cloud cover, and allow you to make your own decisions on where you might want to go. But it looks like it's pretty decent down in Arizona if you really wanted to see this thing. They're not very interesting. Transits of Mercury come by fairly frequently, although we have a bit of a wait for this one. This is a map I've just put together showing the transits from 1600 up to 2200. You can see they tend to occur both in May and November, and they hop back and forth. So we have to go until 2032, November 13, 2032, until the next transit of Mercury. So grab it now while you can. The next one of you can push my wheelchair. And then there's the watching the transit of Mercury. You can see it's already wrecked when I go. Thank you very much.
Test. Yeah. Okay, test. Okay, so I just slapped these together. So there was some big hubbub, I think last week or the week before. Basically, a graduate from the University of Manitoba, J.D. Peoples, was awarded the Nobel Prize.
He went to my old high school, too.
Yeah, he's born in St. Boniface. Went to Princeton University. His supervisor was Robert Dickey. He's received various awards. I didn't do a lot of background research, but apparently he's made a large contribution to cosmology and understanding of the universe. I did watch some of his speech on the news. So basically, when he went into physics, he didn't know what he wanted to do. And he had his supervisor here, and his supervisor, Ken Stanley, said, go to Princeton. And that's where he's been his entire career. And that's where they started this cosmology group with Dickey, and were trying to measure and test theories of cosmology. So he received half the Nobel Prize for that. And then the other 2/4 was shared amongst these two people for exoplanets. There's a lot of information online if you want to research further. Okay, so this is another extra solar system object. It's actually looking through quite fast. Not that fast, but, and this is Borisov, apparently discovered by an amateur astronomer, but there seems to be some contradictory information on the internet. So quite often now I notice if you go to space.com and stuff like that, there's a lot more commercials and there's a lot than tests. So quite often I'll go to nasa.gov and follow up. So I found a bit of a contradiction there. So I'm not sure if he's an amateur astronomer. So just some stats. This is over 400 million kilometers from Earth. It's traveling at 177,000 kilometers an hour. The closest approach will be in December 27th. And it'll be, at that time, it'll be 2 astronomical units away from Earth, and 1 astronomical unit is the distance from the Earth to the Sun. So it'll be twice that distance away. And you can see in the background here a little solar system animation, how it's zipping through. And then by mid-2020, it will zip past Jupiter and no longer be bright enough to be visible. Okay. I kind of got carried away with this, but it was an interesting little bit of research. The International Astronomical Union approved a second set of names, future names for Pluto. Basically, the orange-colored ones are the ones that they approved. And I thought it would be interesting to look at what motivates them to approve these things and how they select the names and stuff. So I took this list and I went through all of them, and I was trying to crop down the text, so some of the slides have a bit more information than we need. But essentially, I think I divided this into 3 or 4 categories. So one was based on the underworld, where I guess some people may end up, who knows. So I'm not good at pronouncing these names, but there's a lake, Lacus, I guess means lake, possible frozen nitrogen that this is named after. And then these canyons are named after some basketball game between some mythological twins who won against the lords of the underworld. And then this one, let's see. Yeah, okay, so that's someone who traveled through the underworld. This is sort of from a Hollywood page. Okay. Then the other one was area exploration and mapping. So the Magellan expedition where there were Juan and his team were the first to circumnavigate the Earth. And then this particular person here, he chronicled that journey, and this person here was making maps, early maps of the Earth in various places. Then atmospheric flying machines, I put them under this subject. So basically the Wright brothers, and then these various Russian, sometime back where they sent stuff to Venus and landed balloons. So Soviet balloon flying missions. And no, this is not the card from Star Trek, so. But basically named after the suspected mountains that are cryovolcanoes. So ice volcanoes, well, probably more methane or something like that. And then finally, astronomers and scientists who basically contributed to the study, to the searching for Pluto, such as Percival Lowell, and researched Pluto and its dynamics and even the chemistry on the surface of Pluto, the dark red spots, thought to be some kind of organic molecule of solids. Okay. So, right, speaking of naming things, Saturn now has 20 new discovered moons. So it surpasses Jupiter by 3 moons. So it has 82 moons. 53 have names, 29 are waiting. 3 are in prograde motion, and the others are in retrograde motion. They suspect that it seems to have the pattern of that something either smashed into a moon and broken up into pieces, or some event happened there with comets or whatever, that all the pieces pooled around Mars. And then there was this interesting article, how can a star be older than the universe? And actually that was a nice, lengthy article, in space.com, which is unusual. But basically, it's a catchy title. So originally, they measured this star, which has this other name here that I'm not good at pronouncing. This star, which was, they measured at 16 billion years old, and the theory for our universe says our universe is 13.8 billion years old. And so there's a bit of a discrepancy there. And so, and that was done by this satellite, Hipparchus. Hipparchus, yeah. And then another team, Howard Bond and a bunch of people actually poured through some Hubble data and tried to do some recalculations. And they got it down to about 14.3 billion. One of the key things in their calculations is that you need to know the distance to the star, and you can do that by parallax. So imagine here's the sun, and here's the Earth. You see the star over here, and then 6 months later you're over here, you see the star over here, so you can get a triangulation and try to accurately work out the distance. The other thing is to properly model the star, so there are uncertainties in that. And so they have this convenient uncertainty of 0.7 to 0.8 billion years, which just includes that result, basically the age of the universe. So within error, it is it's consistent. That being said, it's actually quite important to try to resolve those error bars to see exactly where these two lie, because if there is a discrepancy, that means either A, we don't understand stellar dynamics and aging and stuff like that, or probably more likely there's something wrong with our theory of the universe. And so there's quite a bit of discussion of dark matter and dark energy and how these things can affect those calculations. So Right now, these uncertainties vary from 11.4 billion to 13.8 billion years. The accepted value is around 13.8 billion at this time. The thing I should mention about astronomy, though, is that the error bars are quite big. I mean, if you think about this time scale. So this happens all the time, but we're getting better and better at things. So that concludes what's new.
Both of us up here before, and turns out we've been chasing total solar eclipses for 40 years. Since, this is a mistake, but anyway, since the eclipse track came over Winnipeg in '79. So that's quite an adventure altogether. The short version of the talk is eclipses are really pretty to watch. They just make you stop and look. And whatever you see is your experience. You're not wrong, but boy, do you have questions afterwards. And everybody sees something differently because they're looking differently. They've got different reasons for looking at certain things. The other neat thing about eclipses is there's usually a lot of travel involved, and that also teaches you something. But you really do form many new friendships and revisit previous friendships that you developed at another eclipse. So we have many friends who we see at very irregular intervals unless you know the solar cycles, cycles. And of course you can do a lot of observation. You can kind of pretend you don't know what's going to happen and think about how you would observe it for the first time if you were predating Don Quixote and Cervantes, or predating somebody in Egypt with the pharaohs, and think about what ancient civilizations thought about when they saw those things happening. And I really love the photographic part of travel and eclipses. Jay will complain about how much storage we have in a hard drive, but I don't really care about that because I'm just enjoying it. So, where and when was this eclipse? It happened on the 2nd of July, right after Canada Day. And where it is a very long story. We ended up at the tail end of this long track from the South Pacific in that little notch, just inland from that little notch, as the eclipse track crossed over Chile and then Argentina. And we could have gone in here, but we ended up here for various reasons, part of which is we usually travel as part of a large group, and Jade is the expert to help find clear sky when that kind of weather information is really critical. This is a higher resolution map with a lot of details. La Serena is the area that we flew to observe, and then we went up this road toward Vicuña, right in here. So we were very far from the center line of the eclipse, the maximum totality at, I think it was about 3:43 in the afternoon when it started. And this is why we went to this area. This is a fractional cloud amount estimated from satellite observations on a NASA website. And Jay's done the colors. So you can see along the track, there's two areas where the possibility of seeing it, i.e. the cloud cover, is below 0.3 in the Pacific on a ship, or in this area or across this part of Argentina where it's going to be clearest. Now always there are more details, so again at higher resolution. Again, here's the notch of La Serena, which thank goodness was there because it did make locating the place in the satellite images a little bit easier. But because it's on the ocean, the main issue with this red stuff here and orangey color in the blue is that there's stratus cloud over the ocean, and it doesn't always clear off. And it can reform if there's been fog or cloud earlier in the morning. It can reform in the afternoon, evening as it starts to cool off, which would mean that observing from the beach could be kind of risky. So Jay trucked in on our scouting trip. We went up to Vicuña, and we had also traveled in some of these areas earlier, but the tour we were on was taking people to this area near Vicuña. And you can see that the climatology suggests that that's a really good spot to see it because the cloud cover is low. In fact, when you get there, it's desert, so the cloud cover is low. Generally speaking, you should be able to expect clear in a desert, but it's not always the case. And this is the kind of map that Jay put together ahead of time, following the track, but now plotting the average cloud in July against the location from west to east along the center line. So you can see that the Vicuña area is a low spot, which means a pretty good chance you'll see the eclipse. And so is this area of Argentina once you went over the mountains and into the plateaus. And then, I mean, these aren't bad places to watch the eclipse, but the tour we were in was going to Vicuña. So that's where we were. And this is the kind of thing we saw at La Serena. So here's some of this morning cloud. Some of it's higher, thicker. Some of it's fog on the fog or mist at the ocean front. This was right across the street from our hotel. This city was pumped for the eclipse. They had graffiti of the eclipse. They had a university and stadium event. This is the University of La Serena. They made a huge public series of talks before the eclipse and during the partial phases, and then this enormous stadium watched the eclipse together, and then they had a party. There were tourism outlets all over the place with amazing posters, and you know, this isn't an eclipse symbol, but it's kind of sunshiny, so it really was lovely to think about Friends as the name of your beer looking like the sunshine. The place has an amazing avenue of palm trees, which Terry and Jay and Donna Lynn and I walked up one afternoon. And this was kind of interesting to me. This was a tour that was being sold from the hotel lobby that we were in to see a 99.55% eclipse, which I've never seen before. Usually if you're going to see an annular eclipse, you go to an annular eclipse. You don't go to see an almost total eclipse. But there are reasons why you might, and that would be to see how soon you could see the corona of the sun and all of the details you would see right at the edge of the track of totality. So it was really energizing just to land in La Serena the day before, I think it was 2 days before the eclipse, because everybody knew that it was coming. And the major plan there was either you were going to the stadium to watch with a huge group, or we were going to the beach, which was huge, long beach around the city, as you've seen. The day before the eclipse, Jay and I went with a couple of the guides up to make sure that the site was okay, and we visited Vicuña itself. And that was the eclipse capital of Chile. They had a huge festival going. They repainted this town sign with eclipse colors. They had astronomy students giving out eclipse glasses to everybody. They had amazing boards, big boards up with details, and they had been teaching the public about eclipses for at least the year since we had been there for the scouting trip before. They had booths of information. People were very informed about what was going to happen. They were selling multiple kinds of t-shirts. They'd made sweaters for kids with suns and everything else in them. And this man really impressed me. He was burning total solar eclipse in Spanish with this lens and the sun's image focused on the board. And I thought that was very clever. He even has welding glasses because he was doing it the whole day probably before the eclipse. And hopefully he saw a great time instead of only sitting in his booth. So here is our site. We had, Jay had identified the soccer field as one option a couple of years before the scouting trip. And then when we were scouting, we had identified that it was going to work out. It was certainly a big soccer field, and it had a, not a warm room, a clubhouse beside it with some toilets, and they'd added more toilets, and they put up a tent, because we spent all day waiting for the partial phases to start. So for those of you who are new to this and haven't heard me or Jay talk about eclipses before, an eclipse happens in kind of stages. The first is there's a little notch out of the sun when the moon covers it up. The second contact, it's called, is when that edge of the moon crosses over to the other side of the sun, and you end up with totality. Then there's totality, and third contact is right at the end of totality when you have what's called partial phases of the moon uncovering the sun. And finally, fourth contact is when the sun's clear of the moon. So 300 of us came from La Serena by bus, starting in the dark and getting there in daytime. And we were in jackets because it was cool. Some people had toques and scarves. But as the sun rose, it got warm, wouldn't you know? It's winter there, July, midwinter. But their winter is like 23 Celsius, so that was pretty nice. Of course, we missed summer, but what the heck. You can see that lots of people have different equipment, very different equipment. Some people brought this man who's showing people that you can see little crescents through pinholes on the ground because the sun is getting smaller and smaller, and what you see through this pinhole camera type of hole is an image of the crescent sun on the ground. You see very sharp shadows that you would never see any other time except in an eclipse. But this man actually is a fellow from Quebec. He must have had 15 cameras all set up on a big stand, all doing something different. And I never actually figured out what he got out of all of those. But he's been to enough of them that he probably had at least 50% success with all of his plans. We heard a talk in the beginner session about preparing and practicing, and boy, does that make a difference when you're looking at an eclipse if you want to do, even if you want to observe particular things. Just a side story, he met a woman at an eclipse. The next eclipse, he proposed to her at third contact when the sun is being uncovered. The next year, they were married. The next year, they had a honeymoon eclipse, and this was their second solar honeymoon. Anyway, that was kind of cute. So there were 5 of us that traveled from Winnipeg. The Baileys, Donald and Terry, and a friend of mine from university named Simon. And we really did have an experience at the eclipse that was completely different than anything we would have if we just had dinner together. It was really neat, actually. A lot of people share the moments in many different ways. Of course, everyone is wearing the eclipse glasses to observe or photograph the partial phases. And so this is a whole bunch of people lined up with the tour-issued shirts on and their eclipse glasses. And these 2 people, some of you may have heard of or know from conferences or reading in the journals. This is Olsen Wong and this is Bob Stevens. And they are both amazing photographers, and they plan for months what they're going to do in advance. And they also set up many cameras and recording, and they always make a really far out video afterwards, assuming they've seen it. The area of Vicuña is an area where they grow grapes in order to make what's called pisco. We call this pisco. We don't maybe distinguish between the pisco from Peru and the pisco from Argentina and the pisco from Chile, but they sure do. So Chile made pisco with this lovely eclipse image on it. And a lot of people bought this stuff during the partial phases. There was a very few little booths. And I'd say sort of a memento, because the people who bought this stuff to take onward and homeward with them were made to declare it when they got to Peru, and they weren't allowed to take it into Peru, and they weren't allowed to drink it. They weren't even allowed to empty the bottle and take it with them, because Peru says they make pisco and everybody else makes whiskey like pisco or something. It's kind of like the champagne thing. Now, we bought a bottle and we cracked it open after the eclipse was done and shared it out and had a little bit. So we had an empty bottle in the suitcase. And when I was asked to declare pisco, I said, no, I don't have any pisco. So I have the bottle. Sylvia knows all about border agents being very careful. She can shake her finger at me. There was a school on the other side of the soccer field clubhouse, and they had prearranged with us to bring the students into the field in 2 or 3 batches, because there was quite a few of them. And some of their teachers were translating as Jay would talk to them or someone else would talk to them. So we were showing them partial phases and all of that. And they really did enjoy this eclipse, and we had left a lot of glasses with them and some magazines in Spanish for them. So they had a great time. It was a really fun part of the eclipse. Really teaching at those moments is pretty powerful. It's a lot of fun. So now we're getting to the moon's shadow. So the moon starts out with this little nibble, and it gets bigger and bigger. About this point, the shadows are very sharp. The lighting is liquidy silver or something. When you look at the sun, it's not the way it usually looks. Right here, now your heart's pounding, especially if what you want is to take that perfect picture, which I'm trying to do, but when you get very excited, you have to kind of chill out on purpose. And about that point, I probably start being snarky and I turn into this science nerd, and I just want to be by myself, because these are the things I want to take pictures of. This is the last little bit of the sun shining through a couple of small valleys and a bigger one right at the end. And this is what the diamond ring is, except my exposures are very fast, because what I really like is this red stuff, which is the chromosphere, the very, very close to the sun, for those people who aren't experts. Now, on my screen, I can see that there is actually a trace of the sun, like a corona, a little bit of a fringe. And here, this exposure is actually less than a second after that. So things change very rapidly right at the end. This, from here to here, seems to take a fair time, but from there to that, and it's gone. And that's partly because you're so high on adrenaline, anticipating what's going on. But I love this red stuff. So those are 1/8,000th of a second exposures. It's very, very bright. And then this is what suddenly appears. So I should go back a bit. For these exposures, I've taken the filter off the camera. those who won't be familiar with it, whereas all of these have to have the filter on because the sun is way too bright to see. And this has no filter, right? So now you can see that the second contact was up here. It's quite bright still, and you can see bits of the chromosphere and prominences. In here, something sort of hanging, but now the corona is sort of fuzzing out the detail of that red, because in order to get corona, you have to make a longer exposure, so now you're overexposing that red prominence and the chromosphere. And the gossamer wings are the long streamers on the corona, and every time they're different. Now, people forecast what the sun's corona will look like quite far ahead from the shapes of the valleys, from exactly what part of the sun, from the temperature, from the solar cycle, and from the period in the Saros cycles of eclipses. I always love that I can see things in it, so I'm not so much worried about whether it matches the predicted shape, but I gather it really did. And depending on how long an exposure you take, you get shorter wings or longer wings. And I really love that. So you can start very fast in your exposures, get longer and longer and longer to get those long wings, and then make shorter and shorter ones toward the end of the eclipse. And don't ask me how, but I think there's a certain amount of panic, because when you start to see this, somehow or other your camera is on semi-appropriate settings, and then you quickly rank it up to take very quick exposures again. Now you'll see that this prominence and this one, not quite in the center, were there in previous pictures, but now they're more prominent prominences, because now the sun is going to uncover here, and I'm making shorter and shorter exposures. And this is the diamond ring at the end of the eclipse. And now you can still barely see a little bit of corona, but really it's uncovered too much, so you're not going to see corona anymore. And when it does that, there's kind of a groan and a cheer, and then the sun set. The sun, it's jerky because I moved the camera so I get it all, but there's cacti on the hills up above us, and it's set in, go back, it's set in partial eclipse, which was kind of a neat thing to see. It's not the first time that we have seen it, but it definitely puts a perspective on what's happening and kind of reminds you where you are again. It relocates you to see it. This is an image of the moon shadow starting in the west and going toward La Serena at the same time as darkness is coming in at nighttime. So right in here is where we are, where the two of them come together, because we've just seen the sun set during the partial phase of the eclipse. So the eclipse isn't over yet. But now you can't see that it keeps going very far, but it has just toward the end of the eclipse, going over South America further. There were a number of ships out here. One that we know about did not see the eclipse. They got lost trying to figure out where the cloud would move, if it would move, where the ship thought it was going, and people got very upset, as you would, but really there's never a guarantee about eclipse weather, ever. So we really did have a fine day out. We celebrated with our piso, which I have to say is not worth lugging a big bottle of it back home to share it. It's potent, and you just need a taste. There was a great lunchtime conversation with Terry and Donalyn and Simon. We had really lovely lunches for what was a picnic with 300 people. The hills turned this beautiful rose-orange color as the sun was going down. And on the end of the eclipse and in the beginning, those partial phases show up as crescents under every tree, and there were some beautiful trees on the side of the site. So we got back in the buses, and we went back to La Serena, and that took a couple of hours. It could have taken a lot longer because the traffic could have been nasty. But it turned out it wasn't horrible. It turned out they had seen it on the beach. And this is a photograph of the shadow. You can see the cone of the shadow of the moon around the sun in eclipse and the ocean there. And there were a few people from our group who opted to stay on the beach, and they had a marvelous time. Now this is gotta be able to see Alt tab here. I'm just gonna go Alt tab to here. This is our video, but it kind of pulls it all together. That's what I thought. But no sound. How come? No, that sound's probably crappy. Anyway, we don't really need the sound, but maybe lets you hear me. So here is the hotel, the drone view of that beach that we saw, and then this couple went to Cerro Tololo. We did not go on that. We went to Vicuña to make sure the site was going to work. And so they were able to go around the dome and inside the dome and watch the dome move and see the big telescope. They hadn't been there before. A number of these folks hadn't seen a big telescope before, and it was really exciting for them, but it was quite high up in the hills. And then they talk about viewing from an eclipse soccer field, and they put a drone up. Now, it didn't put the drone up anywhere I noticed the drone. They definitely avoided places, but there's our soccer field and the sun, and all these people are moving about. The drone was incredibly stable, manages to rotate around. You can see those dry hills with the cacti on top, the area of Vicuña nested in the mountains, the grape growing area, and there's the sun again, setting toward the west. Now this is just in the partial phases. You can see the shadow bands on the sand that you see as if you're looking through a bathtub with ripples on it, and they're projected onto the bottom of the bathtub, and it gets darker and darker. Now, it's interesting, when I look at this video, I'm watching what these people are doing. I know that if I wasn't taking pictures, I would not be standing still during an eclipse. But it gets really dark, and they're still not excited. Whereas I'm trying to maintain my cool in order to press the camera button. These people are so cool. I just couldn't believe that, but I found it quite fascinating. Now you can see the sky goes quite dark. Again, you can see the shadow of the moon with the eclipse in the middle. Now, if you sort of generally watch that, you'll see that the shadow moves in relation to the eclipse. So the sun is setting, but the moon is moving, so the shadow moves off the sun. And gradually it gets uncovered. I thought it would be interesting to see that. So by this time you have to definitely put the filters back on because the sun is uncovered. And now they're going to show again the shadow bands as the sun is being uncovered. And they do kind of look happier. This group, but still not like ecstatic or anything. You see how sharp these shadows are? They're so crisp because the sun is a very narrow source of light. Okay, so I'm going to go out of that. And I'm going to go back to this. Okay. So now, a couple of eclipses ago, I don't even know how long ago, I started to try to sketch what I had seen. Might be that afternoon, might be a couple of days later, just because sometimes it takes longer to find a couple of hours to think by yourself calmly because you're celebrating. Sometimes things happen so fast with a bunch of people that you just don't get a time to consolidate. But I find that by trying to draw what I saw and describe some of the points, I actually remember a lot more about what I saw than I would if I just took pictures or just looked between. Because I've developed a method of taking pictures semi-autonomously, even though they're by hand, so that I can look over the camera at what's going on in the sky. Now I'm comparing what I saw with a composite that Olson Wong put together of his images. So he takes a very long image of the corona and a very long image so that he can see the lunar surface, and also takes shorter exposures. So the shorter your exposure, the closer into the sun you will see the detail of the streamers. And then this high dynamic range composite puts those together so you get an impression of what you could have seen if your eye was able to do all of that range all at once. But really your eye can see a whole bunch of this when you look at the sun in the sky or look through binoculars or through a telescope or a camera. But the composite has been used to try to bring you the idea of the detail, the range of things that you can see. You know, I didn't do too badly remembering what I'd seen, and certainly the main details of the sort of a loop here around this prominence in the corona, and then the other prominences, and you know, I'm trying to project everything on top of one circle, but so is that. And I find this is beautiful for the corona, but those details that I really like, the chromosphere, aren't really there. Anyway, there's all kinds of comparisons you can make. I got new ideas about what to see when we were putting this talk together. The other day, Jay found this article on the web by Gordon Telfin, and he talks about the proportion of light changing just before totality from partly red and mostly blue-green, that the green drops right out of it, and then blue and red share that last little bit of illumination. I found that really quite interesting. I'm not the physics person, so I wouldn't know all of the details, but I can speculate a little bit on that. The other interesting thing I saw on the same website was because the sun was setting and refraction changes with the elevations, and you're looking through more atmosphere, the partial phases between third and fourth contact after the totality were 9 minutes and 10 seconds shorter than the partial phases before totality, between those first two contacts, because it was a sunset eclipse. And this is the web website. You can email me or look it up if you're interested in that further. But I hadn't noticed anybody say that before, although we have seen sunset eclipses. I'm pretty sure it's happened all the time. Anyway, after the eclipse, we had dinner, and then the next morning, half of the group goes home, and the other half went to Peru with us. So, just a little bit of detail about Peru. There's a lot of color in Peru, and people were very friendly. Peru was in the finals of the South American Soccer Cup, whatever it's called, and we got involved in watching the game on a huge screen in the square in Cusco. We ended up seeing traditional weavers and listening to panpipes on the street and seeing llamas and vicuñas and alpacas, and really just getting a flavor of Peru. But I should say that if you ever think about traveling to Peru, the flavor is amazing. They have 4 of the top 10 restaurants in the world are pegged in Peru, and the food really is marvelous there. It's very, very sumptuous, tasty, rich, amazing. Then we went to Machu Picchu by train through the Sacred Valley and viewed those amazing walls of construction that have been now restored after going up the switchback. I think there were 14 switchbacks up to the hilltop, and then many pictures pointing down the hills, pointing up at the walls. The stonework is quite remarkable there. The fittings aren't with mortar, they're angled so that the front of the stones that you see are together and the backs of the stones are more open, so they have a little bit of wiggle room when they're building them, but they're very stable. There's Terry and Donna Lynn in the classic tourist pose. We met these people. I talked about a book I was reading. Had they read the new Davis Sobel book on the computers, the women computers in Harvard, who had identified star positions by doing tons and tons of work on all these glass plates? Well, it turns out he's a very good friend of Davis Sobel, and he's an astrophysicist, and I think it was from Harvard, and so is his wife. So, you're schlepping yourself up a hill to see the sun gate at the top of the hill at Machu Picchu, and you're pooped out with some really famous people. It was really interesting. But they're just people on this trip. This is another fellow. His last name is Yeomans. Don, yeah. So he was apparently described as one of the 100 most important people in the world in Time magazine. He's one of the people who calculates the trajectory of near-Earth objects that might crash into the Earth. I think he's retired now, but my bet is he's still consulting. This was described as mirrors to look at the sky in some kind of ancient observatory system. I never really did figure out the advantage of looking in a pool of water on the ground instead of looking up in a very dark place, but that's what it was described as. We went through the Sacred Valley, which is the Cochabamba River, and there's tons of very high mountains. The condor is the bird of note that people look at. Many sun symbols, many kinds of different hummingbirds, a lot of art with the sky or the sun and the moon in it. This was the bathroom with a view. It was beautiful in this restaurant. And this was one of the observing nights that we had at different hotels. A fellow that we met named Doug George, who's not the Doug George in Quebec, but also was trying out his telescope to look at the Milky Way. And he didn't stand still for me, but I tried. This is a picture that I took of the Milky Way. I tried out Jay's lens seconds at f1.8, and I got this kind of Milky Way. So this is Jupiter, and I think Saturn is here. It was beautiful to see the Milky Way so easily. This was from a hotel room, just beautiful. And a different part of the Milky Way than we typically see. Cusco has Sacsayhuaman, which is also a very old set of walls and battlements to guard a civilization on the top of the hill. And there are many examples of the finesse with which they built those walls. Compared to the Spanish architecture, it's quite a bit different in the town. And there are a lot of churches. Jay likes to pose, pretend. This is us on soccer day, and this is when Peru scored the only goal. There was a lot of celebrating. Again, just a lot of color. This is typical wiring in Cusco on the streets. I don't think it would pass muster here. So this is a description of a painting that you'll see in a minute. It was done by Miguel Cartagena, and it depicts the Milky Way over Cusco in July and August. The deities are personified celestial bodies, weather phenomena, according to this Inca astronomy, which is very briefly mentioned in a couple of the colonial writings and in folk tales of Quechua, which is their indigenous tribe. So I'll skip through this here, very describing the river that you'll see. But this is the important paragraph. So in the West, we describe the asterisms as the thing you're seeing, and the light of the Milky Way is what is described. In Inca astronomy, it's the opposite. It's the dark stuff, those beautiful dark lanes that we really like to see at star parties and sometimes see better than others. There's a water serpent, partridge, and a toad, and a llama, llama, and a baby llama, and a fox with red eyes, and that's, this is the Milky Way depiction. So, here's the serpent. A little bit, the painting is kind of cut off, and then there's the toad and the partridge. I guess they're important. Then here's a llama, and here's a baby llama, sort of upside down under the mum. And then this is the figure that's alternatively described as a shepherd or a fox with two bright eyes in here, these two red eyes. But you can see that the dark lanes are pretty complicated, but also very prominent in the night sky of the southern Milky Way. That was very beautiful. So after we were in Cusco for a couple of days, we went to Lima and we saw lovely horses that are bred there, especially because they walk in a certain way and they're very quiet and steady. We briefly poked our heads into a pisco salon, I guess. They must have 40 kinds of pisco. Lima is a very dusty place. It's also right on the seacoast, and very close by are sand dunes that are huge, and there's many, many people living in an area with essentially no rain. We went the last evening to this Waka Pucana, which is like an enormous pyramid on the top of a major hill in Lima, which has been used by a couple of different civilizations, most recently as sort of hollowed out pockets of these handmade bricks that they used to store mummies and bones in. But they have made this site into a museum, and they have a lovely museum restaurant which is open air. But that evening as we left, the mist had come inland enough to start coming up this pyramid-like structure. And as we were getting into the bus, the mist was quite beautiful and sort of blowing in the breeze. And I said to Jay or somebody, "Oh, look at how heavy the mist is, isn't this beautiful?" And one of the local people said, "Madam, this is not mist, this is heavy rain." That's the amount of rain they get in Lima. Not very much, but the mist is enough that they probably don't have an astronomy club that's super successful unless they go inland as well. You can see the Nazca lime type configuration in a flower garden in Lima. We didn't go to Nazca this time. Terry and Donna Lynn did. The police were aware of us, and we were certainly aware of them. But the guards, we gave little Canada flags too, because I took a few for Canada Day. And, this is supposed to be music. Why is that not playing? But in any event, Terry found a grand piano in the hotel lobby the last night or two and played us out. He was marvelous. People were singing and dancing, and he really got his own back after having had a couple of traumatic falls and not being so happy in the travel. But it was a really lovely way to end a great trip. And then we started for home the next morning. So I'm just wondering if any of you might venture for an eclipse in the future, or at least agree with yourself that if one is coming within a couple of 100 miles or kilometers and you can get there easily, you will try. Take your kid, take your mom, take your brother-in-law, take anybody, because it is a marvelous thing, and you don't get that many chances unless you deliberately go. Opportunity knocks if your eyes are open, essentially. And this is a whole other trip, but I'd really like to tell you about Namibia. So thank you very much, and I'll answer questions. I hope it wasn't too much of a travel log. I hope there was enough eclipse to keep your interest, and I'd love to talk about it with you. Thanks. Are there questions? Doesn't have to be. Yes, sir.
That was a bang-on sketch you did of the total eclipse.
Thanks.
Yeah. Secondly, what altitude were you at the soccer field?
What altitude? I think we were at about 800, 700 meters. It wasn't super high.
That whole area of Chile is very, very astronomically focused because Judy's already mentioned Cerro Tololo, but 4 of the world's biggest observatories are essentially within sight of where we were watching the eclipse. So you see Cerro Tololo on one side, and just over the horizon up the road is La Silla and the brand new, what is it, the extra large there.
Magellan at Las
telescope
Campanas.
putting in is going there. So the whole valley has got little amateur scopes, and it's got E&Bs with telescope observatories in the back, and tours everywhere. So bringing an eclipse to this valley was perfect because there was so much local knowledge, as well as the European Southern Observatory people also did a lot of public relations.
You had a question?
Just what time was local sunset there?
Local sunset.
Because you said
sun
the
went
eclipse
behind the hill.
was setting. So
Yeah.
what time was that
I
setting?
think it was about 5 o'clock or 4:50. But of course it was behind the hill, but it wasn't
Right.
set. So there was still a long twilight kind of illumination. That's when the pink mountains came out as we were packing up.
Okay.
With all your planning for to find the right spot, how many failures have you had on your journeys?
A couple. one in South Africa, it was clear just across the Limpopo River from where we were, but we couldn't get across the river. It had been clear at 3 in the morning, and we saw a comet, and the sky was beautiful. And as we were getting the bus to where we were going, it crapped out. And we saw partials after, you know, not really the same. And Mongolia, we went on a trip. Jay was asked to fill in for somebody who was leading us a very small trip because the man's wife was having their first child, and he was going to be killed if he went on an eclipse trip in Mongolia. So we went, even though Jay said ahead of time this was going to be really dicey in Mongolia. And we arrived at the airport, and it was cloudy then 3 or 4 days before, and he said, oh, it's cloudy now, then it'll be clear, and then it'll be cloudy again. So we were on the wrong part of the cycle. So we hardly saw anything. We saw a couple Pac-Man figures. That was 97. Africa was 02, I think. We were almost clouded out in China in 2015 or 14, but it was sunny. There were two. It was sunny, then it was raining, then it was cloudy, and then the sun appeared through a hole in the cloud. Wasn't perfect, but we saw the totality, and then it poured for 2.5 hours all the way back. So, you know, we saw it. The interesting thing about getting clouded out is it gets really dark. So you still have an eclipse experience. It's just not the totality, beautiful photography thing. You still learn something. You still can think about what ancient civilizations would think about when the sky went super dark. And they can't tell that it's the sun unless they think, oh, well, the sun's giving us light, so it's probably covered up or something.
You have to realize that I work with a travel company, and they send me to the place which has the poorest cloud prospects. Because
So, not a great...
they don't need a meteorologist where the weather's always good. So I get all the crappy locations.
Not always. Yes.
I think you mentioned you flew into Peru 2 days before.
Right.
The trip. If a beginner would fly around the world to see one of these things, would you recommend maybe a week before?
Yeah, it's really important to sort of figure out where you're going to go, how to get there. Do you know how to get there? Do you have everything you need for that time you're there? So we flew in a couple days before, and we had been there before in exactly those areas. And if you were just traveling by yourself, which there would be entirely possible, like most places in the world now, you can travel mostly by yourself. You at least need a couple of days to get over the travel, figure out, you know, which side of the bed you're going to get up on. Everything's working. Go to the site. Sometimes people go to the site the day before or 2 days before, and they just kind of camp out. Other times, they have to make a mad dash in because you can't stay anywhere near it, or, you know, all kinds of things. But definitely that advance time is really important if you aren't aware. Yeah.
Do you get goosebumps during totality?
I get more than just goosebumps. Super goosebumps. I know my heart's going crazy, and I really do have to bring myself down after those really sharp shadows so that I'm ready for that chromosphere right at the start, because that doesn't last very long. And I find it's just still remarkable to see, because that's the only time you ever see those shadows or the lighting the way it is, or the changes in that chromosphere within a few seconds. You know, just standing there looking, yes, but I don't think I want to go the computer route. I just want to be able to observe and do it. And I connect with that chromosphere. So I'm really keen on that. Once it's total, then it's almost like I'm looking around the sun, and then I'm looking at prominences, and then I'm looking at what's changing, and then I look around to see the lighting in the sky and what's happening in the trees and things like that. And people, I guess it's shut off. People are part of the eclipse, so I really like to be with all those people because they scream and they're happy and they hug and everything like that. Even though in my head I try to be alone to get those first pictures. But the people are super, and everybody sees it different. Everybody remembers something slightly different. Oh, I didn't see that. Oh, I wasn't looking for shadow bands. Holy crow, those shadow bands were the most we had ever seen shadow bands. And they were dramatically dark, and they got faster and faster and faster. And the wavelength got shorter and shorter and shorter. So they were flickering like crazy on the ground. And if you were busy watching them for too long, you missed what was going on. Right? So it was very interesting to see those. And there were people who didn't see the ones after, or didn't see the ones at the beginning because they were busy doing something else. You kind of open up your head for it and get excited. Yes?
Yeah. You describe what's in an eclipse like a mystic experience, but also like a very complex process that you have to be very prepared. So my question is, what are the sources of disruption, the sources of disruption,
the excitement?
No, not the excitement. Disturbance that you should always avoid. What made you not to be focused in that moment? Because it's complex, no? You want to enjoy the view, but you have a new environment, many people around. What are the sources of not concentration that can break the mystic experience?
So part of this time, during the partials, the sun was getting very small, and birds started to go roost. A vulture went, there were some parrots flew across, and I also liked bird photography. Well, earlier in the day, I set up the camera and everything was ready to go, and then I started to look at the birds, and I thought, I'll just take the camera off, and I sort of changed all the settings, and started taking bird pictures. I'm walking around looking at birds, and everybody around me is not looking at birds, and I think, I better cool that for a bit. I put the camera back on, but then just before, birds start to go roost in the trees all around us, and I thought, I could just take the camera. No, stupid. Why would I do that, right? And then there's always somebody that asks a question, will I be able to see Mercury? Yeah, but there's a total eclipse happening. We did see Venus. I think some people did see Mercury. I didn't. I saw Venus. What else? There are often people who buy a new camera on their way to the eclipse. And they don't know how to work their camera. And I don't know how to work their camera. I'm still learning how to work my own. Or their tripod doesn't work, or they need duct tape, or and so you've got it, more or less. And the other distraction, now that you ask, is Jay set up a little telescope so he could watch certain things during the totality. But I don't know that he looked very much. So it was distracting to me to worry about whether he was seeing what he wanted to see, because I cared. And yet Terry and Donna Lynn and Simon saw lots that they would never have seen because Jay was there with the telescope set up for them, kind of. And so you can feel all the tension of many people. And this guy with the 15 cameras, I don't know what he was going through. I was far enough away from him, kind of on purpose, because it would have freaked me out. There are many things that could distract you. The other thing, you'd have to go to the bathroom before. Anyway, I should let you go. I don't want to talk too long. Thanks for listening.
All right, thanks everyone coming out. We'll continue on our other portion of our meeting, Boston Pizza at Coconut Highway. Everyone is welcome to join us. So that will conclude our meeting for October 18th, 2019. For Royal National